Hello, welcome to Waiting for Game, a podcast presented by Melee Stats. I'm your host, Gimme Dat Wheat, and we've got a little bit of a Garden State episode today. We've got some of the best and brightest from New Jersey. Sorry, that's the norovirus that's coming up. I guess we'll get to that in a second. But we got some of the best and brightest from New Jersey, past and present, to talk about the latest tournament that we just had. We just had Collision 2023 in Parsippany Troy Hills, which I believe Ipengu on our last episode lambasted as the boonies, and we got some New Jersey hate towards that. So maybe we'll ask our guests today how they feel about that. And I have one of the most well-spoken, the biggest lifting people in the scene. Of course, I'm talking about my good friend Amby Sinister. What's going on, Amby?
What's up? I'm here to talk about New Jersey. Everyone
You're
loves
here
when I
in
do
your new echo chamber.
that. Indeed.
We got some complaints about our audio issues last week, so happy to
Make it worse.
welcome people back in with with you sounding like the voice of God. But yeah, very happy to have you here, and happy to have with you. We talked about him, the second coolest Jake that was in top 8. Probably the third coolest Jake to be at the event. Shout outs to Crike. But we've got Chroma here. What's going on, Chroma?
I'm just chilling. Zane does not like New Jersey, does not like the suburbs. When I showed him my new house, he very politely did not say that he would kill himself if he had to live there. So, for all intents and purposes, he performed very well last week, is what I'd like to say. His normal level is much more angry at New Jersey.
I'm glad that Ipengu's rage towards New Jersey could be subsided just a little bit. We're going to get into what happened at the event very shortly, but let's talk about how the event went, because this is kind of a weird event. We were talking about it before, is that it's an event that probably would not have been so important in any other year, but now it's like the cornerstone of the first part of the season. This first time Melee event, a long running Ultimate event, is now being called like almost a super major, which I think we'll talk about that might be a lot to handle for something like this. But Jake and I both went, and I want to talk to Amby about your experiences watching. But before we do that, Jake, how did you feel as an attendee? This was probably your first Collision, right? Because everything else is Ultimate. So how was that?
Yeah, it was interesting. First of all, the TOs on the Melee side, Anchor and Nico, are my goats. I had no problems with the other, the top TOs as well. What I would say is that it's interesting because from a competitive perspective, you look at who's there, you look at how difficult top 64, top 32, top 8 were. This was a super major in that respect. In the respect of being able to handle as many people as, a Genesis or a Shine, or honestly, kind of smaller level tournaments. This was, I've never been to like a Xanadu type event.
Well,
but space-wise, it was tough, right? Like if I were an active competitor, I think I would have had a really tough time being there. What helped for me was just not actually being in the venue a lot. I live close by. I drove in. It was just kind of a crush of people. And it's funny because I think about the day when we can, go to events where we don't have to worry about our health at every event. And, I think the policies were good, and I'm happy that they were still there. If this were like a no masking event, it would have been. We would have had even more crazy stuff going on, is all I've got to say. So, it was neat, and I really think the Melee TOs were really responsive at the end of the day. It's just the venue was a bit small.
Yeah. I think it's definitely one of those tournaments where expectations, if you don't manage your expectations for going in, then I understand the complaints, right? And I think that people had a fair amount of complaints without really realizing, whether or not they realized it or whether or not they just accepted that this was not a convention center tournament, right? This was not, like you mentioned, Shine or Riptide or the Big House or Genesis or anything like this. Even though the talent was there, this was very clearly not it. And with all the news that we've been hearing recently about, BTS and the couple-month-old news at this point about, VGBC and SWT and Panda, like, these things are probably going to be more and more frequent. We had an episode where we had Junebug on, and we talked about how every single thing is capping right now. This was an event that capped 400 some entrants. We have Major Upset. That's our next big tournament. It's going to have I think it's got a cap of like 380 or something like that, 386. So we're going to be running into these things for a while, and it's about the scene adapting and actually, being in the mindset to, go to a tournament like this. But in terms of tournament experience, I had a pretty good time. I know a lot of people had complaints about the schedule, and I know that's being worked on for future iterations, and a lot of complaints about how, if you want to go, you better make friends with someone who has a car, or the Uber Eats receipts are going to pile up, and that's definitely true. But it's just it's a different world than it was when we had an episode complaining about Pound. I think that the Melee landscape has differed a lot. So yeah, it's odd because I think that there are a lot of negatives that Collision had against it, but I have a hard time really keeping those and thinking about how that would affect how I feel about Collision in the future, because the people who actually did the work did a great job. Not to say that TOs of other events that have very cramped environments don't, but I have some faith in the future of this event. This is the first time they ran Melee. I don't know if there's any plans in the future of a new venue to accommodate both games. I don't know if there's something along those lines, or I don't particularly know, but I do have faith that makes me kind of pause before I take any of my criticism and really levy it hard against this tournament. And but you didn't go to this. I don't know if you got a chance to watch. Did you watch any at all this weekend?
Oh yeah, I definitely did get a chance to watch it. I missed out on Friday because I was working, so I didn't get to watch giant Melee.
Having a job flex. That's where we are.
But yeah, no, I had a good time watching over the weekend. If I could make like a very very quick analogy, I'll probably get more into this as we go on into the episode. But to me, this tournament felt a lot like a Fight Pit 5, right? Where it was I think there were a lot of complaints about the schedule and the venue, and it kind of felt like it was a regional which had the responsibility of being a national. And I think that's a very awkward spot to be, because oh, it's Mango and Mewtwo King are here or whatever, right? And it's it's hard for me to really fault the tournament for stuff that the tournament was too attractive to too many people, which caused a bunch of problems, right? That feels like a weird criticism for punishing the tournament for being too successful in some respect. But it definitely was kind of nostalgic watching it, because I think that regionals were pretty neglected over the last couple of years of even slightly before the pandemic. It seemed like a thing that not a lot of people really paid attention to, and not a lot of super top talent really went to any of them. Mm-hmm. But now we have Zane Jmook grand finals at what I would consider kind of a regional tournament that we're all paying attention to as if it's it's a really big tournament, really big deal for the scene. And I kind of like that, right? I kind of like that there's kind of a community-wide interest in regionals, even for top players. I think we really needed that with the collapse of BTS and stuff. So that's just my piece as someone that watched it from home. I'm sure we'll talk more about it.
Just to add to that a little bit, I think what we're learning is that a lot of the bigger tournaments are not as sustainable as we would hope they were. A lot of them very openly ran losses for a while. And, all it takes is just a couple of advertisers to go a different way one time, or, something doesn't pay out the way that you'd expect it to pay out, and all of a sudden your tournament is just in danger of existing. And it's funny because, I was surprised how many top players went and, how competitive it was.
Yeah.
It speaks to, kind of the centralization of talent on the East Coast these days, but we can come back to that. But yeah, I mean, I think this looks more like what tournaments will look like going forward, and I think somehow we're going to have to get used to that. The thing that I worry about is the schedule. Ultimate just got the first spot. There really wasn't much to do about that. And as far as the staggering on days 1 and 2, to run those types of, Shine or Genesis or, Big House type transitions, where you play your round 1 and then your round 2, or your round 2 and your top 64 to top 8, in connection with each other, you need way more setups. You just need a huge amount of setups in space.
Yeah, I don't know if any of you saw, but RJ, the head TO of this, did a little recap. It's pretty cool to see, pretty enlightening. And like you guys mentioned, yeah, it's seems pretty scary at times. Like all this seems very tenuous. He said that personal reasons meant that this planning started later than it should have, and then like a really big thing happened with Smash World Tour and Panda, and suddenly a lot of advertisers didn't want in. You know, people who had signed up and given numbers and said stuff like that suddenly were pulling out because, you know, you don't want to give money to a sinking ship, right? If you don't think that the tournament's going to happen, like if there's any chance that it could be canceled by Nintendo or by the fact that they have to just go under themselves, why would you give money to this thing? So a lot of people dropped out, and yeah, it was just really interesting, and you know, it's one of these things that like, it's not pretty because that's what the insight into these tournaments are going to be. It's not going to be extremely pretty, and you know, they talked about how they had prided themselves on a paid staff type of thing and had to switch to volunteers for a lot of it. So there was a little getting used to there, and I think that you know, I think this tournament had a lot of good volunteers, and it's just one of those things where like I would like to have them have the full run, because this was obviously a tournament that not only had to be the next super major, but did it with not the cards not in its favor at all. So I'm willing to give Collision a pass for whatever happens, which I want to say, I don't think any of it was that
I
bad.
don't think anything really happened, really. I mean,
No,
if I think
exactly.
about it, Nico and squad got a best of 5 only tournament just running completely on time. They didn't have as many setups and as many space, you know, as much space as you'd want. Still got it all done. There was something funny, like there were a couple conversations I was hearing throughout the year where it's like, well, you know, if Panda was still around, maybe things would be different. But from what I heard, you know, just to leak a little bit, I don't think they were hitting their activation targets. I don't think that was really going the way that, you know, even if they were still around, I'm not sure how sustainable that whole thing was, you know. I think this is where we were headed into 23, regardless of even what happened at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to say. Ambi, do you remember? Were you on the podcast a lot when I talked about? We talked about this last time when I talked about buyer's market.
Oh yeah, no, you talk about this all the time. So
I do. Well, guess what? It's not a buyer's market anymore.
Well, it's a
I
buyer's
think
market for talent.
I think people have to understand that they can't you can't just sit out every single tournament for
no.
various different reasons, right? People would sit out because, oh, I don't want to do this because it's not, you know, whatever, right? They would pick like little things, and the like there's real things about Collision that would turn me off from attending, but I don't think we're in the world where having to Uber Eats your food in is going to be a deal breaker anymore. And you guys are right. You know, Collision and Major Upset are going to be these kind of like major-esque regionals type things, or regional-esque majors, whatever you want to call them. They're going to feel a little awkward, and I'm sure that, you know, Full Bloom coming back next year is going to have a similar spot in the scene. And you know, Wave Dash got bigger this year, so we might see them trail upwards, or go upwards. But yeah, it could be a very real possibility where we have like kind of anchor majors where you've got Genesis and Big House and, you know, maybe like Battle BC and Gommel and SmashCon and Riptide, like those things, to various degrees, I feel pretty confident will still exist in the iterations that we know them as. So maybe we start having the things that we used to do all the time, where it's like there are 2 tournaments a year and everyone goes to them, and then everyone goes to the regionals. So it's a sad thing to imagine, but you know, I think that we can't be you know, beggars can't be choosers at this point. If CEO and Combo Breaker want to host us and they have room and are sustainable, which who knows, right? In the tournament infrastructure, we don't even know if that is a big if or not. Yeah, I don't think that we can be as choosy as we were before. But yeah, that being said, Collision, I personally had a really good time. I had a lot of friends there, and I thought the talent pool there was really, really interesting. And I think it's something that we can get to right now. Do you guys want to talk about the results that happened at Collision? Because there were definitely a lot going on. You know, this is the first major that we've had since Genesis, so it's been about, you know, a little over a month and a half. And it's always cool to see this, because this is talent from the other coast Genesis had a lot of West Coast talent, a lot of talent from all over, but Collision had like all the heavy hitters from the East Coast, whether or not they were regged. I don't know. Chroma, did you notice how many good players are there and were just hanging out? There were a lot of like really talented people who would probably make top 64 at this who just were registered as a spectator or were not able to register in time as a competitor and had to go to the door to buy their passes. But yeah, no, this is an event that not only included all the East Coast talent but included some European talent. Ambi, when you were watching, was there anything that stood out to you as like a really spectacular run?
Oh, well, I mean, I think you got to give it up to Zuppy, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that
Yeah.
there's really no answer to this question that isn't Zuppy. You know, I kept thinking, like, as I do for a lot of these runs, where, like, they would beat one particular player that I thought was, like, a big upset, and then I'd be like, cool, like, they placed one spot higher than I thought they were going to place. And then they're like, oh, but they play, like, a LOD next. There's no way. And they just, like, kept winning. So, you know, you got to give props to Moki. To Zuppy. Moki also had a very fun run at this tournament.
Yeah.
But, you know, unfortunate to run Goat Mook in loser's bracket. But the Hungrybox set was awesome, so that was another good one.
Yeah, you want to talk about that? That set like fried my brain. Edwin and I were watching, and we were just like, "Why is this happening?" And Jake, I know you're on commentary. I'm sure you probably are feeling something very similar. But I want to hear Ambi, your little fox brain opinion on that set, because I thought it was a very funny one.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that Moki is very hard for me to understand as a player, right? Like, I get kind of similar vibes watching Plub, where I'm like, what are you doing? like, stop that. But yeah, you know, it makes a little bit more sense to me watching Moki play like a Fox Ditto or like a Spacey, where like their psycho extension heavy play style feels like, you know, like it has tangible reward that makes sense. But Moki playing against floaties and Puff especially, I just feel like it shouldn't work. Like it just feels insane whenever he does the things that he does. But like it clearly is like sustainable and like reproducible and very good. So I don't know if I have anything particularly interesting to say about Moki versus floaties, because it's just very different from like my internal processing of those matchups. It's just like, oh, this guy's just goated. I can't do this.
What I end up thinking when I watched that, first of all, it was kind of weird. Why did all the up airs not get SDI'd?
Why did the back airs get DI'd like that? There's a lot of questions.
That's drift. So what I think Moki is really good at versus Puff, and occasionally I see this in other matchups, he's bizarrely good at just attacking at spots that most people don't, but you can. It almost reminded me of watching, like, what's that North Carolina video where it's just
Evil? Is that what it's called?
Evil, yeah.
Yeah, like a little
David's
bit
video,
just like,
yeah.
oh wow, you can attack Puff there, like you can back air here, or you can try and like contest this there, or do this extension. It just feels like Moki's really either practiced or thought about just like hitting Hungrybox on a lot of spots where Hungrybox isn't used to people coming at him, which is kind of neat in the world of even Cody and all the Foxes that he plays. I also thought it was weird, like, when I see a Fox get hit with that many of the Hungrybox setups, like the no rest up throw or the roll in rest, I don't often see a Fox win those, you know?
Yeah,
so it's
no,
really
it's
freaky.
crazy.
Yeah, I thought it was over.
One of the really weird things about watching was, I know, what, Moki went up like 2-0, right? Am I
Yeah.
making that up? Yeah.
On the first Streamline game, it was really solid if I remember right.
So maybe this is, maybe going up to 2-0 and HBox adds to this, but I didn't really feel afraid for Moki at ever, which is not generally how I feel when I watch HBox. There's like very few times where I'm watching HBox and with a lead where I go, this is fine. Like, you know, HBox will get a lead in stocks, and I was just like, well, you know, I bet Moki will nair him a couple times, throw him up on the platform or whatever, get to, like, whatever he was doing, like, he was playing out of disadvantage very well, but also I don't think HBox was capitalizing on the fact of, like, any single lead he had. I mean, it went game 5, so maybe it's, like, rude to be like, he never capitalized on it.
They bring it
But
back.
yeah, it definitely felt like it was not pushed as far, like, the advantage wasn't pushed as far as I normally see it in HBox sets.
It was
No,
weird
it's-
watching
it's
somebody
very-
else have
Yeah, go
agency
ahead.
in a Hungrybox set.
Yeah, right. Abby, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I have two thoughts on this. The first is that like it's very funny that Hungrybox lost this set because he really had like the dream bracket to like
Oh, he
win
had
the whole
Jmook.
tournament. He had Jmook into Zuppy into probably like that'd be like for losers finals, right?
Yeah.
So him losing to Moki like right before that tasty Jmook bracket, really funny. Yeah, no, I remember something that Moki mentioned on our show when we had him that one time, most recently, where someone asked him about like, how do you know how to be so good against Yoshi? And I think he gave some answer that was like, I'm not a very good fox to study for Yoshi because I feel like my skill in that matchup is like being really comfortable in all the weird situations and like it's not really like my overarching like simple game plan is really strong. It's more just like I know where I can hit Yoshi really well. I felt like that about Jigglypuff as well for Moki, where it's like the structure is really hard for me to understand, but like it's very clear watching it that like Moki definitely knows this is a good situation for a fox or whatever. Very good judgment. So I think that like probably plays into why it kind of felt like he wasn't in that much danger because he really just felt he like projected the comforting feeling of
Yeah.
of being in the driver's seat the whole set where it was like, okay, well, I rolled into the rest, but like this is fine. It's just like how it goes. So he's a very interesting player to watch, just like as a fox main.
I think it's a
But
cooler skill set to have than anything where it's just like you just have this really obvious and simple plan. First of all, I think people don't end up really liking it when they perceive that. They just think, oh, Fox is broken. I also think that, and who cares about them really at the end of the day, right? But I really, I'd rather have that comfort in all those really weird situations. Whenever I've done best of this game, it's just like, I can't tell you like, oh, like, I did this or that versus the puff. It's like, no, I just knew that like, if you scrap with pound here, I can hold down and dash grab and like, or like versus Marth, you're like, I know that if he does like these three like wavelands, I'm fine. And then, I think it's kind of a cooler way to play. But it also is a little bit more adaptable if your first plan just does not work at all.
Also helps when you're Moki and you can actually like do the most insane combos.
Oh, yeah,
That
I
also
mean,
makes it very cool. There's a couple different aspects that make it cool. Well, we're coming off of the second major in a row where he has beaten HBox. Both were, he seemed pretty comfortable. This one was game 5. I believe that one was game 4. So we have to start thinking, is this what we're going to see more of? Is Moki going to be a threat? I know we saw it online a few times, but it took a lot of sets for us to actually see it in like an in-person major. What do you guys think about HBox going forward? He's kind of an interesting little, case study because he's not really been succeeding necessarily, but he very well possibly has one of the most lopsided matchups in the top level against who could very well be the number 1 player in the world. So where do you guys view HBox right now? What do you think, Ambi?
yeah, I mean, I'm not that worried for HBox. I think it's wishful thinking to think that HBox will not succeed in Melee. I think it was a very fun period during quarantine when it appeared that he was not succeeding. But then you looked at his bank account, and it was like, oh, he's just playing a different game than the rest of us.
Yeah, he always wins.
His eyes on his paper.
But yeah, no, I mean, like, Hungrybox, I think, will be fine. I do not expect him to, like, suddenly start bombing. I'm a little bit more worried for Amsa, personally, in terms of players that are top successful, that are not succeeding in the early parts of this year. But I do think that, like, both of them can just, pull it together for the next tournament. Like, I don't think there's any like huge skill moves that happen that is preventing everyone from succeeding in any particular tournament. Yeah. So, I mean, we'll see, I guess.
Well, yeah. Do you want to talk a little about Jmook's run? Speaking of, how the other people in the top 5 or whatever we want to call it are doing. We talked about how Moki ended up playing Jmook and losers. Something we haven't seen in a little bit was a losers run of this caliber, and we were talking with Ipengu in our last podcast. He mentioned Leffen has never had a losers run major. Zane, pretty famously, I think, maybe not famously, but it's a thing that's been brought up a couple times is that he has not had a losers bracket run other than Four Loco Fight Night, if you want to even count that. And we see here Jmook, dropped down to losers, played Cody, and we got to see him. He went through Moki, he went through Zuppy. Those did not seem doable. It did not seem very close, which for people like, cracked foxes as they are, is obviously very good. He played Cody, and then he had the grand finals versus Zayn, the 3-0 into reverse 3-0. One of the, I don't know, what do we think about this? Because this felt to me like one of the more dominating tournament performances that we saw. It just so happened to have a loss in it, right? Jake, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Anook that said this, and I think it was also very apparent in the venue. There were just 3 people there that nobody really had a chance to beat. And it's kind of wild that Amsa wasn't there. I mean, I talk about where Hungrybox is going to be at the end of the year. I don't know about Amsa. He'll make it back, but it really just, I mean, if you watch the matches, there was like Jmook almost lost a game to Crike. Mott Money almost lost a game to Zayn, and it's just like they elevated so quickly past any level of, oh, this is doable or this is fine. Cody the entire time was just also on that level. Sometimes you feel like you can catch Cody off, and I don't know if that's a Fox thing or possibly something personal with the medication or something like that, right? Where he's just, you do have these natural variabilities in, the level that he plays at. But it was really shocking to me when I watched Jmook once again just like tear Moki apart, and at no point Moki even looked like he could combo Sheik. And then Zuppy had like 2 stocks where things looked good, and then Jmook kept doing what he does to Zuppy over and over again. But it was just, it was weird, I guess. It was weird, like how badly Jmook and Zayn and Cody just beat everybody. That wasn't them. It was a little bit freaky.
Not something we've seen it a little bit, right? We talked for a year, maybe more, about how wide open everything is, and it's possible that maybe we have to change our thoughts on that. Maybe it's not as wide open as we thought, and the reason is because it's actually the new guys who are doing all of the winning. We years and years ago was the 5 gods, and of course, it took a while to even have tournament winners outside of the generally, them and Plop and Leffen. But yeah, it feels it's two majors in, so maybe a little early, but it does definitely feel different than it felt last year. Because last year felt like anyone could do it. And when we had our little round table thing, I think, what did you guys say? Like 7 people might win majors, 8 people might win majors.
I still stand by it.
I am getting a little worried. I don't know if it looks like a year where 7 different people are going to win majors, considering one guy's won 2.
I guess what was freaky to me about it, just to go back to it, is that Cody played, in quarters he played Rishi, who beat Kador, and Rishi looked incredible, right?
Yeah.
And there was really no chance, it felt like, for Rishi to win, even in Marth Fox. And we know Cody's good at it, but it's Marth Fox, right? And then you also had Zayn versus Spark, where Zayn just crushed Spark, and you have Jmook versus, it was Axe, right? And then you later see like Jmook versus Moki, and it's freaky that in those matchups, it just did not look doable. And I don't know if it's going to look like that for the rest of the year, but I think we just have to take our hat off to just. I mean, when Jmook crouched the up smash in losers finals,
it was a classic Jmook moment, I think.
It's like, what you see
the most unbelievable thing of all time.
Yeah.
But no, I think if I could just briefly talk a little bit about like the idea of losers runs. It is very interesting thinking about like which players make the losers runs and which ones don't. Because like you think that like it would have something to do with consistency, maybe, because they have to like win twice as many sets as someone that would win through winners bracket. But then you get like players like Mango, who are not really known for their consistency, that can still make the losers run. And I wonder if there's just like a degree to which the losers runs happen to people that have the capability to beat the other guy through a wall really badly. Because I think that's like the lacking element a little bit for some of these players that are like more winners bracket players like Zayn and Leffen, where it's like, I don't know, it feels a little bit more like, oh yeah, like I'll win all the game 5 sets, and it's like I can do XYZ thing. The big shock for me is Hungrybox not doing that well in losers recently. That to me is the weird one because Hungry Bucks to me feels like the perfect candidate for like a great losers run player, and we haven't really seen that, especially recently where he has been getting seventh, I think, at everything, right?
Fifth at Genesis, right?
Fifth at Genesis, seventh here. Yeah, HBox is kind of an interesting middle ground. You know, if you think about like people, some of the biggest names in Melee history, Mango's like the losers run guy, and then you have to look at like, well, you know, Armada never really had to make a losers run. He had you know,
He
his,
had
like
like one or
Evo.
two.
His like Evo run to second was great. I think he think Smash Summit 2 might have been a losers run or whatever. Like he had a few, but generally never had to. And it feels like HBox is a funny middle ground because he has the really like momentum based play that Mango has, and then also has the like the just how do you beat this guy aspect that Armada had, where you know HBox in his prime was like not really going to be one to drop down too early. And if he did, he was not one to get eliminated very early. So, yeah, HBox is a very interesting player there, and someone who we've definitely seen, not really shine in that capacity. I mean, I talked about it on the episode that we had talking about Level Up Expo, and I'll reiterate it here. And maybe it's like, I don't know, it started as a joke, but maybe there's some truth to it. This is like Ultimate Season. Melee is like very clearly not the same game that Ultimate is. I know that it was always kind of big dogging us ever since we came back from the pandemic, but now more than ever it's very clear, and it's fucking Summit season. You know, he got eliminated at third by Kadoran at Level Up Expo. That same weekend he got voted into Summit. Like it's hard for me to take some of these things and you know say that it's anything more than just him very obviously being distracted, which is like that's on him, right? You know, if you're a competitor, you come in. I'm not trying to give excuses. You know, if you want to be viewed as a Melee competitor, I'm not going to take in other aspects like that. But yeah, I wonder if we're going to continue to see him a little distracted. And then you got Leffen with Street Fighter 5 or 6. Like there's definitely little weird aspects here that kind of give me pause in the future. And then we've got Plup, who hasn't really been entering a lot, and Mango, who we don't even know the next time he's going to enter. So I guess the question I have for you is, do we see someone getting to the level of Jmook recently? Because his success, I mean, 2 majors in a row, you know, call it what you will, is very big. Not a lot of people win back-to-back majors. I think Melody 942 tweeted that out. He is in a pretty elite tier of people who've done it. And the last person who we saw that reminded me of this was Zane last year, winning Genesis and Pound. And at the time, he looked extremely unbeatable. So I guess the question is, how do we view people? You know, can someone reach Jmook?
So to answer a couple things, I'll answer this first, and then I'll talk about losers runs in a little bit. I mean, the thing that marked 2022 for me was that you had these little arcs of people doing this. So you had Zane at the beginning, right? You had Cody right before Cody had like surgery and a huge amount of family stuff. Cody looked like the #1 player in the world. After that, you know, you really had a case for Amsa and Mango at various points. Both of them put in incredibly dominant performances at various points. Right now, it's Jmook. So I really, you know, I think anybody can get there again. I think the dynamics are very interesting right now because Cody, Zane, and Jmook are grinding really, really hard. And if Plup and Leffen aren't, Hungrybox right now is noticeably, it's ult season for him. I noticed at Collision, most of the time he was just hanging out with Ultimate people, doing Ultimate stuff.
Wearing his little blazer.
Ultimate, but wearing the blazer, putting on the Cuban links, right? Like he's definitely in like its Summit season. I think people understand it's a bit of an off season. I will say though, given how much people are grinding, I actually thought Jmook was going to have trouble before Collision because Jmook was a little bit less grindy than the other two. He just looks incredible. So, you know, I'll never count anybody out. On losers runs, it's interesting. There was a stat that Blur always loved, which was the only player to win Super Smash Sundays in the time when it was round robin into 24-man bracket. The only person to do that without getting that first round bye for being first seed in the round robin pools and win was Westballs. And it was because Westballs was the only one out of them who could conceivably like be second or third seed and not be playing completely dog shit that day.
Yeah.
Like if, you know, if some of them were getting second that day, it was just a bad day for them. For him, it was like he just screwed around. And so I think people with more variability in their play and then the ability to go on streaks, they will succeed a little bit more. Whereas somebody like Zane was really a victim of his own success, even with extremely difficult brackets. I think about LSI main bracket, where something like the last sets that he had played versus almost everybody he played had beaten him the time before, but he managed to win,
Mm-hmm.
at LSI. So I think in terms of losers runs that versus something else, I think Zane ends up just being that guy that day, right? Whereas Jmook and Cody are so close, I don't know, I think any three of them could have won it from losers. Probably some of the most impressive losers runs of 22 was Cody. If I think about how many times he would lose to somebody and then storm all the way back, or like lose to Mango and then storm all the way back and lose to Mango. I think there are certain things that are predictors of making losers runs. One of them is having a really bad matchup versus somebody in the top. And I actually thought Jmook would lose to Hungrybox early at a tournament and then beat everybody else through losers and dodge Hungrybox on the way back. I thought that's how it was going to happen.
Yeah, it's possible. I don't know. We might be seeing that. I mean, speaking about Cody losers runs, we just saw it at Genesis. He lost to Cody, or he lost to Moki in probably winners quarters, I'd imagine, and ended up got second in the tournament. So this is we've definitely seen the resiliency of some of these players, even if it's not necessarily taking home the gold. And I mean, the question that I ask is, can anyone catch Jmook? And I think it's a pretty obvious yes. And then it's the two people who are in that tier. The better question is probably, can anyone else get into that tier? And for the near future, I'm probably gonna say no. I think that Mango is capable of playing amazing, right? He was fucking like one of the best players going into Genesis, and I think that we've forgotten that and might be kind of playing that off. Plup did very well at Genesis, even if it was like an underrated performance because he's not been lights out, and it was not anything that like we haven't seen before from Plup, so I think it was a little underrated. We haven't seen him. There's a possibility of seeing him. And then, whenever H-Bucks wakes up from his slumber, we'll probably see him end up winning an event because he usually does that. But how I've been seeing it recently is that every event I go to, I see 4 guys, and they all play each other, and they all hang out. And it's kind of like Melee's little brat pack, right? This is the new era, and every single event I go to, if I see Cody, Moki's there, or Jmook is there, or Zane is there, anytime you see one of them, they're all around, and they're always playing. When I did Smash World Tour, when I TO'd that, the Smash World Tour Eastern Conference Finals, East Coast? NBA brain, sorry. The East Coast Finals, where it was something where we had a ton of good players there, and people from MTV came to practice with people. Regardless of what matchup they were going to play, I could probably flip a coin, and that would determine if I was going to see Zane playing Cody. This doesn't matter if it was Friday before the event started, or Saturday or Sunday as the bracket was going on. These two played every single moment that was possible. And you go to events like this and you see the same thing. These people are like, they're always hanging out, and they're just grinders, and they play each other all the time online, right? There's Zane and Moki, whatever. Zane and Cody play all the time. I know Jmook plays with them, and I have trouble seeing people be able to grasp that level. Even Moki, this was being a top 10 talent this past year. I'm not going to call him the same level as that, but yeah, it is something that is really, really paying off, and you can tell. And until someone else is willing to put in that effort that they're putting in, I don't know if we see it. Ambi, what do you think?
I think Hungrybox could do it. I think that you're generally correct. I think people who play a lot get rewarded. I think Hungrybox could do it. I think Hungrybox needs to play a little bit more, and then he'll
what
be
does do it
fine.
mean?
Catch Jmook.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think Xbox could. Do you think he could be number 1 in the world? Because that's currently what Jmook is, right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. I think it's total cope to say that he couldn't be number 1 in the world.
He just beat Amsa and Jmook a bunch. And
I mean, like Amsa looks super vulnerable.
True.
Jmook is the best player, so all of his wins on Jmook are going to look super good until Jmook finally listens to me and goes Fox.
That'd be insane.
No, I'm actually on Edwin's side. Edwin doesn't want it to happen because, dude, I'm so right.
I wanted to
Why
see
doesn't everyone
I'm
listen
gonna
to
be
me,
I'm
dude?
gonna be insufferable when he finally does it.
Going to
I will
be?
say,
What are you now?
I'm already pretty insufferable about it, but
if Jmook just got blackout drunk and went Fox and beat Hungrybox, he would be, as someone on Twitter said, the white boy of the year.
True.
That'd be
Hey,
insane.
speaking of a blackout drunk, let's get Walt blackout drunk before he commentates next time.
I agree. I think we should do it. He unfortunately blushes really bad after he has like a little
Yeah,
bit.
we went to the bar beforehand. He got water.
Yeah, that was.
We'll
that
get
was
him one
good.
day.
Man, 4 hours. I mean, that was a block. My life
Yeah.
a movie. Can anyone catch Jmook? I think the biggest thing is going to be somebody outside of the top players, because all the top players keep giving themselves horrible illnesses by hanging out all the time and invading diners. I don't know what they're up to. You can tell everyone what we did the night after top 8, like you and I, as opposed to everybody else.
We did not go to a diner.
Everybody
We hung
else
out-
piles in to Ubers and goes
Yeah.
30 deep to this diner, which is then instantly shut down because like someone destroys the tip jar. It's not a smasher, maybe. And then they all have communicated some like norovirus disease to each other in the process. Weed and I have like a beer at the bar and just have like a nice chill night. And we're fine.
Yeah, well, I mean, what you didn't know is that I took my bottle of tequila and I went to June's house, June's room.
Well,
and,
you go to June's room. It's all fine there.
Yeah, it was all good.
as long as you're not June, I think that's like
June
an
will
important
get
caveat,
sick.
right? June still gets sick.
June gets sick every time. Jorge
Oh
said
yeah.
he went to June's house. June got COVID. Jorge didn't get COVID.
June just he sucks it all up. Like he is it's very very nice. It's like when I went to Fate and got COVID and I was hanging out with like Amsa and Nagaimo and I was like, I ruined their trip. They have COVID. They took like 28-hour flights to get here and no one got it. Everyone around me did not get COVID. So
Incredible.
yeah.
So I
soaked it
think
up like
that's
a
what's going to
sponge.
happen. They're all going to poison each other, and then I don't know, like Laud will have like 2 free hours, or Chef Rock will have like a weekend that's free once, and then just become the top player. Or Mango's been grinding super hard, and we just don't know about it.
Well, if it takes norovirus to catch up to these three, then I think that they they're gonna be pretty
PPMD.
good for a while. It's gonna get them at some point.
PPMD is our #1 player for 2023.
Speaking of which, you got fine. No norovirus on your end.
Yeah, no, I'm great. I feel strong. We went out to the gym. We lifted a bunch. We curled. We had a great time. Commentated for 4 hours. Felt great. Went home. Went to work. Was kind of tired, but no, I mean, once you train every Wednesday like I do, with all sorts of substances and ways of altering your brain state, the mindset can protect you from everything, and that's science.
You know what they say?
After the
It's a
melee stats-
mindset.
After the Melee Stats Dudes Rock compound, nothing can hurt me. You know,
Yeah, we
after
gotta
that-
make-
Legendary.
We gotta get another round of that compound, or
We do.
or build one in Wyoming. I think.
my
is the plan.
bench went up like 25 pounds after that.
Dude, it's got magical powers. That power rack in my basement.
It was unreal down there.
That's what they call a power rack. It gives you powers.
So that's like really my tips for making sure you don't get sick. It would just be really lucky, just be blessed by God.
Good
That's all I
career
can really
advice too.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say I would recommend it.
But yeah, to circle back a little bit from God, if you don't
Jmook.
mind. Yeah, speaking of my new God. No, sorry, that's not my bit. That's someone else runs that bit. That's territory that's taken.
He talked was just like in heaven that entire top 8. I could just hear him behind me, just losing all of his senses in mind, and
I could hear him on stream. He was
Yeah.
very loud.
yeah, he was
He was much louder than everyone else in the crowd.
just about 8 feet away from my microphone. There was no way you weren't hearing him.
It's a good time to be a Jmook fan. I think we all can agree on. Because regardless of who ends up winning the tournament, I think it's hard to really count out Jmook from getting to grand finals or losers finals or any of this, right? Like, what do we see? I think Zane got 5th at Genesis, losing to Jmook and losing to Cody. Jmook's got.
That was 5th, yeah. Yeah, because he didn't win in losers, I don't think.
I don't think so. Well, I think the important part is that his only losses there, I think, were Jmook and Cody.
That's
the
true,
other
yeah.
two people in this like new top three that we're talking about. What were Cody's losses? Cody lost to Mogi, the other person who I kind of mentioned, and lost to Jmook. Here he lost to Zane and Jmook. It's just like, it's a good time to be a fan of any of these people because whatever they're doing, it really feels hard to see them having a lot of trouble from like any interlopers. Regardless of that one Moki set, it's just like they all seem so tough, and it really seems like they can only beat each other. Until Hbox plays Jmook, I guess.
Slug will be back.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I do think that the sample size is a bit small. I think that, Cody and Zane and Jmook looking like they can only lose to some people. To me, that feels very similar to being like, well, Amsa is going to lose to all these people now.
Didn't you say that?
No. I did not say that.
Tried to gotcha you.
No, you're gaslighting. Yeah, no, like I just feel like they don't look as vulnerable as the people that are losing. But I don't think that they're like immune to those same losses,
Ambi, I don't think you get a core tenet of this podcast is overblowing stuff. Do you not remember when we Zane won Genesis and Pound and we were like, is this one of the best years of all time from a Melee player?
Is Leffen going to... It's like Ashcon messaged me in like 20... I forget which. But he's like, Leffen's just going to get too good at the game. We're all going to get bored of it because no one's ever going to be able to beat Leffen. We do this every time,
Yeah, I do feel that way about Jmook once he goes
That's
Fox.
true, though, but they would be so beast if that were true.
Well,
yeah, he's gonna the game.
I think the idea of everyone quitting seems... it's a good segue to a topic that we can talk about. But if there's anything that you guys want to talk about Jmook or like this tier of players or anything at Collision, feel free before we go on to our next topic.
I think I should get credit for doing top 8 of a super major. That's all.
Didn't you do Wave Dash?
Don't think it was that super.
No, I didn't actually do top 8 of Wave
You
Dash.
didn't do top 8 of Wave Dash. Okay,
I had to go home.
This is your first super major then.
Right, Wait, Wave Dash would have counted, and I would have gotten to commentate Jmook's first win of a super major.
That's fair,
I would have
that's
demanded the set ended as soon as the forfeit occurred. I tell you that much.
Well, okay, how about this? Ashcon said we're all going to quit because Leffen's too good. I saw another friend of mine who made a point about how we're all going to quit. We generally don't get into Twitter discourse too much on this show.
Oh.
Or if we do, we're not very open about it. We were usually, are a little more on the down low.
Tune into Foresight Fights
while
for
we
all Twitter
subtweet.
discourse.
Yeah, that's why we work so well together.
It's
But
true.
I think it was just yesterday. This past week, Tafo tweets about how the scene is never really going to be in a very good spot because every single TO is going to end up quitting. It's only a certain time before everyone just gets fed up with the bullshit. And I think there's like a lot of interesting points here, and a lot of points that I agree with, and some that I disagree with. So let's pull the tweet up, and then we can basically just go on our feelings about it, go over our feelings, because I think that it has a lot of implications on the scene. Especially after all that we've seen recently regarding BTS and Panda and everything. Vamp more as I'm.
Can we pull up tweets now? JD, pull up boobs.
JD, do not pull up boobs.
JD, pull up Lovitch and Silent Wolf combo videos, please.
JD, you can do that. Just don't.
JD, pull up Ambisinister versus Ben TMT bracket.
It's a great set.
It's a great set.
So the Tafo tweet, this is from yesterday, and Tafo says, the scary part for the Smash scene is when most of the TOs start realizing they don't have to run events, and rightfully so. They will realize the stress, abuse, and burnout greatly outweigh the positives of helping the community. This will be the point for no return. Now, Jake, you've been in the scene a little bit longer than we have. You've been someone who is, I guess, working behind the scenes longer than we have. I want to get your opinion on this because, this definitely is something that there's kernels of truth to it. But I want your opinion on the sentiment that's said here.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of true, but he probably shouldn't say it. I mean, this scene works off of incredible amounts of hopium and just love of the community, and we do know that this all exists because we don't pay people what they should make in an ideal world, right? I really think that probably the best thing to do with this sort of discourse, so to speak, is to just kind of engender a situation where we're a little bit more cognizant of making it more sustainable to reward the people who make this ecosystem possible. I was complaining a little bit in the Discord about like the notion, like why do people not like top players complaining? I think top players have a lot that they give to the scene. I think they have a lot of good points when it comes to the schedule. But I think what rubs some people the wrong way is it's like they have all these followers on social media, but more than that, they are paid to play the game. They have sponsorships, they have a stream, they have partnerships. Like they're really the only ones making any money off of this. And then it's like they're going to go yell at Nico, who does not make any money off of this, eats a lot of shit on a lot of different levels, right? To try and make all this happen. And I think it is true objectively that, like, if we don't change that, then, I think we might burn out all of our talent. It's like the Lorax, something has to change. It's not that we will be, there will be no trees. I think saying it like that is bad, but if we keep doing it like this, we might not have any more trees is, I think, a fair and base thing for the Lorax to say at the end of the day. I think it was a little bit, I mean, I don't know. I'm not gonna
Maybe a
take shots
shift
at
of
Fluff today.
viewpoints, right?
Yeah, I think it's important to just kind of stay optimistic about it because what the scene needs is Scar levels of weapons grade, just hopium.
That is, yeah. Scar loves hopium.
And he should. People love hopium.
I think that yeah, there's and Ambi, I know you probably got some thoughts on it, so we're gonna get to you very soon. But I think you're right. I think that there's a lot of like pretty salient points here. It just feels like it is telling TOs to never get into the community rather than telling players to not abuse people, right?
Right. That's the you can't be like all the trees are gonna burn down and let's all just kill ourselves right now.
Like,
Let's not
be
be
call it a day.
trees.
Like the inevitability. It's like, well, it's inevitable that players are gonna complain, so all the TOs are gonna quit, as opposed to like, hey, I think we could change this.
Right.
Maybe none of you like, like it's a touchy subject because like, you talk about complaints, and they naturally lead into what you talked about, which is like players who actually make money on the game complain to people who don't. And I don't know if that'll really change. That's a really tough thing.
Yeah.
Like your TOs are never gonna be making as much money as the players do. Fuck, man. I mean, like the people who, like anyone who commented or like anyone who did like a reaction to the top 10 or the top 100 made more money off it than I did. So it's like very clear that the power play is in like a specific favor here. But yeah, I think that like the actionable things is that like the idea of stress, abuse, and burnout seem to be avoidable topics, right? And that's something that they will come with being a community figure, just because that's how our community runs. There's a beautiful thing about the community is that we can run everything without having to like, write a letter to Nintendo and have to be approved to do all that anymore. But there's having the ability to do that within your grasp does lead to a lot of stress as well. What do you think, Ambi?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on this particular topic, and you can feel free to cut me off at any point because I might just ramble.
If we hit the hour mark, I'll cut you off.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing that I think is important to keep in mind is that we've all experienced this type of burnout, right? Like this is something that's very familiar to pretty much anyone who does any community-facing stuff in the community. Not just like we're a bunch of spectators that don't know what we're talking about. Like we've felt this burnout firsthand, so I feel like we can speak with a little bit of authority here. One thing that comes to mind for me is like YouTube comments for our videos. And if you like super abstract away the fact that like these top players have like huge followings and it's really annoying when they complain about your thing, if you make something in the community, and like, it goes semi-viral or whatever, you get a bunch of people that look at it, and like you look at the comments are usually people like positively engaging with your shit. Like people like other people in the community. Like it's a community full of people that like appreciate the work of other people. Because like we all know that it's like emergent, that it's like this thing that like just people do because they feel like it's not like it's our jobs for the most part. And like you can look at YouTube comments and find some deranged, nasty shit in there, right? Like some of the most insane things I've ever read in the comments of our videos. But to me, I think that there's a certain degree to which focusing on the complaints is like this thing that is rewarded from like algorithmic social media platforms, right? Because the problem is like, you know, some top player complains about the schedule and like says that you're doing a bad job, right? And like, you're gonna get that in your feed as a TO. Like that's going to appear in front of you, and like people will send it to you if it doesn't. They're not gonna send you like every top player that isn't complaining being like, I had a pretty good weekend. You know what I mean? Like that's just like that's not rewarded in like the war of social media attention, right? So I think one thing that is helpful to remember is that the majority of people are not abusive to other people in the community, right? And I think that's like important to keep in perspective where like, yeah, sure, some people are entitled, some people are really annoying. But we do like each other. And like you get pretty much any person in the community that like does this a lot, that's like around, is competing or TOing or whatever. Like it's very rare that you can't get them to like some sort of common ground, like not through the trenches of the internet, right? I really think this is an issue that's super, super boosted by like negative social media tendencies. So that's my first point, where I think that like we all actually love each other. We just don't know it. The second is that I think it's okay for TOs to not be interested in the game anymore. And I think it's normal to assume that other TOs will come and appear and fill the gaps that are left by them. Because the analogy that I want to make here is, I don't know if you guys have ever seen like a speed cubing tournaments, like the Rubik's Cube speed solving tournaments, right? Like you go to those things and it's like children, like literal children, like 7-year-olds that are like going crazy and doing like sub 10 F2L or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, like if you're involved with this and you're 23, you are much older than everyone. And that's weird. And like, you want to know what's annoying to people that are 23? People that are 7.
Good God.
And I think it's very normal for like people to age out of communities that they are older than. And I think that like this shouldn't be framed as like attrition. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh my God, like the TOs are getting old. Someday we will all die. Like, okay, like a young person will become your age now and then be like, oh, well, you can just do things in this community. And that's really cool. And like, maybe I can run a tournament and maybe Jmook and Mango will play at it. Like that's really cool about our community. And I think that's great. And I think if you don't want to TO anymore because like these gremlins in your mentions that are much younger than you and are super annoying or like too much and the reward isn't that high, like that's great. Like you had a great career. We all appreciated you. Please come to the tournament every now and then and say hello. Like go off into your new hobby as an adult. Like I think it's perfectly fine, right? Like I think that it's not like cause for alarm that people want to do different things than Melee. Like there's a big world out there with many things to do. So I will cut myself there. a lot of things.
I think we're very blessed in that respect because, like, and I have a lot of respect for some of the people I meet in Ultimate. You know what I'm talking about. But, you know, at the end of the day, if that were, like, my scene or my game, I think it would really freak me out because a lot of the people are very, very young and I just don't relate to them in the same way. And my competitive drive to, you know, play this game for 3 or 4 hours a day is just not there right now at all, or even, like, my interest in competing. And so it really is kind of like a social aspect and also like creating things for the scene and doing things and telling stories. And I think we've gotten very lucky with Melee that we've basically all just kind of aged together. And I was at this kind of sweet spot where I was in college when a lot of the people who were getting into the game were in college from TMG. And then we've all kind of like aged. And at this point, it's like, you know, there are younger people, right? And they find things fun that I don't find fun. But it's totally acceptable to just like, you know, sit at the bar and hang out with weed, you know, and not, you know, go hang out with Touchdown Juan at the diner, right?
Scherzo's there.
Scherzo's there. Scherzo's 7 beers deep. It's a pretty good
Couple
time.
lemon drops.
And I think it manifests in a couple ways. And I think the community has really matured in a lot of ways. And I think if I felt like that weren't happening, I think it would make some of the tough social issues just completely incomprehensibly miserable to deal with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like we're very lucky in that respect. But yeah, I mean, like I think it's fine to have on phases and off phases. I mean, like Blur and Taffo are definitely on off phases right now, and I think that's fine. And if they want to come back in, that's good too. But they also ate a lot of shit for the scene, and like,
we
they're not in a
don't
space to do it
necessarily
that
need
way.
to expect an on phase coming from them. I think that's one of the things.
Right.
It's interesting talking to TOs, especially regional TOs. I feel like this is a very prevalent thing. Is that like you'll talk to someone and they kind of understand the kind of way that these things go. That there's like a finality to it in a sense. And a lot of this comes from colleges. I think a lot of the people who I talk to, who are like known as TOs of like their regional scene, are like the TOs of their college scene, and then what happens in college is, well, you tend to graduate. It could be like me, not.
Hey.
but like you've got like a very like a set time period where you're like, okay, well, I'm a sophomore now, so I guess I'll be the president of this club for the next few years, but when I graduate, I won't be here. And people tend to like make their mark and like get successors. I know that like this is a pretty common thing in a lot of areas, is that like people will try to take a person like another TO and give them the resources they need. So it's definitely something that exists. But if I could go back to your first point, Ambi, I've got a question for each of you. You talk about how because of social media, we're like really rearing to go whenever there's like negative complaints, because that's just like naturally how it is. I guess we're, I don't know, what are we, fucking content creators, commentators,
We're to describe what we're
figures.
sure.
I don't know what we are, but we are public figures in the scene. We make things, and obviously we are subject to comments and criticisms. But one of the things that me personally has always affected me is it's not that the negative comments get boosted more. It's just that my dumbass brain will care about the one negative comment more than the 10 positive comments. So I don't even know if it's a social media thing or if it's just social media has now given the opportunity to feed into this like very
it is a little bit of both,
thing.
I think, right? Like it's both like the social media platforms that we use, I think, really boost negativity. And I also think it's like the way that we all engage with social media. Like that's like a completely separate but also like equally valid thing, where like people being nasty to you is so much more memorable than people like being grateful. But yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I mean, I think you're right here, and I don't know why I'm interjecting the way I am. Sorry, but like this is a thing that like is demonstrated about humans, and it's something that actually always made sense to me, whether that's depressing or not. I mean, they run these experiments on kids, like toddlers, babies. They react more quickly and more evocatively to an angry face than a happy face, and part of the reason is because, like, if somebody says like, "Hey, good job," like that's cool. I think about that. I still remember that. I still remember when people say nice things to me at tournaments and that sort of thing, right? But the bad stuff, that makes me think like, oh, there's a threat here. Like that's something I got to pay attention to. Like if we, as humans grew up ignoring that, we probably wouldn't have evolutionarily to survive to get to this point. So I get it. I wish social media did not, amplify it. And I think it's something that's, incumbent upon us to just really try and focus a little bit more on and wire ourselves in ways to be a little bit healthier about like everyone not hating me or something like that. And I think it's also fun. Like, I think I have this experience too where like I'll go to a tournament and I'll have a great time, but like the stream will be a little bit funny and people will be very upset. And this gets, a lot of complaints because it's like there's something going on that we need to fix and we need to address this, and people aren't talking about this, and I feel like we need to boost them and that sort of thing, right? And then when you're at the event, you're like, no, it was fine, it was good, and part of it's still like, I'm not sure if the event was really meant to be the best version of the event as a broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a little bit
interesting.
unrelated. Yeah,
It's definitely interesting. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's a personal issue. Whenever someone says "good job," I'm like, was it? And when they like levy criticism, that I tend to be like, yeah, you're right. And even if
Oh
they
yeah.
don't levy criticism, I try to be very self-aware, and my brain literally cannot get rid of mistakes that I've made from years ago, from my entire life, let alone Melee. Dude, I still remember. I think it was one of the Smash and Splashes. I seeded Shroomed way too high, and I was like, why did I do that? Why do I still think about that?
I ran,
But
I ran
no,
six pools, top 4 make it out. I just fucked the bracket.
yeah. No, I mean that it'll always stick in your mind. But yeah, maybe it's interesting because there is a difference between, we talk about social media, and I said, well, is this something that is like inherent and will always exist, and it's just amplified by social media? And I think you're right when you said it was a little bit of both, right? This stuff will always exist. People will always have complaints. People will always have compliments. But if I think of all the work that I've done in the scene, keep in mind that good amount of this work probably was in the pandemic. Maybe that affects it, but the compliments that I got all were in person, or the ones that I remember at least, I guess. And the criticism I got tends to all be online. I definitely think one of the aspects is that like it's so easy when you can hide behind your little username, or when you're not even talking to someone, even if you're someone who's notable, and these things will follow you. It's definitely easier to like tweet at an event and say this is the shittiest thing I've ever been to, because if you probably go up to the TO and say that, you might not actually feel that way once once your mouth opens to start saying that. Ambi, we kind of cut you off, but I'm sure you had a great point.
I mean, yeah, I mean, the thing that I think the way that I would describe this most saliently is that I really don't think we have a gratitude problem in Melee. I think that's the way this conversation is usually framed, because it's probably the way everybody feels. And I think that's true of not just TOs, right? Like, I think that's probably true of top players. I think that's true of us. I think that's true of like doing anything in the community will make you feel like no one cares, no one appreciates you. All you do is engage with all this awful stuff that people send you. And I do think it's a lot because of like what you're mentioning about like the human tendency to overfocus on criticism and nasty comments and like the filtration of all the positive stuff. I think what really needs to happen to like fix this problem is less that like we need to stop criticizing or what have you. I think the bigger problem is that we don't make people feel good enough when we compliment them, right? Like, I think that's the bigger issue. It's not really that like people don't like TOs enough. It's that like the TO doesn't feel appreciated enough that we like them, and that needs to be better communicated to them. And like the same for top players. Like, it's so easy to be a top player, I think, and to lose and to like tweet like I am sad that I lost, and to see like the 3 people that are like in every single thread that are like, you should die. You don't deserve to play this game. You should quit forever. I hate you. And like that guy just exists in your mind permanently, right? But like, you look at any player and like they have thousands of followers, they have all these fans, like, like everyone admires them except for like the 3 people that are like flaming them in every single post-loss tweet. And I really do think that the problem here is more that we need to make people feel that they are appreciated as much as they are, rather than like there's too much criticism in the community. I think that's a impossible problem to fix compared to the former one, which is like a lot more attractable to me personally. I don't know what you guys think about that though.
Well, when I used to work retail, I had people come up to me because I was customer service, and I had people come up to me and they would very, very rarely give compliments. And then every time they would basically say like, yeah, I think about all the people who complain, and I think about how all the people don't give compliments, so they go out of their way to do so. And that's a thing that people don't tend to do. If you're happy and you're content, you don't like sing it to the masses. But if you're mad, you go like, this is bullshit. Can you believe that they did this to me? So yeah, I agree. And the issue to this is saying, well, you can't have any criticism, right? Because that's not how this works. If a tournament runs like shit, not that Collision did, this is the Collision episode, but if like a hypothetical tournament runs like shit, people are allowed to say it, because there's no way that we can succeed as a community if we have to grin and bear it and act like every single aspect of it's perfect. But you're right. I mean, there could be more positive stuff, and something that I think we're working towards is trying to make the criticism actually be actionable and something that we can work towards without having to dig through Twitter. I know people tend to get really annoyed when the way that you find out some top player has a criticism is by logging on to Twitter. like,
Seeing.
and especially
Yeah.
like you
If I could
can't.
just super
Yeah.
quickly, right? Like just to super quickly interject. There actually is like psych research on like this sort of thing, where like people always talk about like, oh well, criticism needs to be constructive. Constructive criticism is like a good thing. Constructive criticism will like help you or whatever. Like if you want people to perform in a specific way, it is like 4 times more effective to positively reinforce them. Like to point at something that they're doing well and being like, you need to be doing that more because it was good. And I think there's not enough of that. I think that's sort of what I'm trying to get at here, where it's not really that like, I think even if we made all of the criticism from all the top players like super actionable, right? Like, oh, it's all constructive criticism. None of it is flaming. It's all constructive criticism. It would still feel pretty bad, I think, for the TOs. Like they would get all of it. They would be like confronted with this list of things that they did incorrectly. And I think more what I'm trying to get across is that like, we need to make them feel like they're doing something well so that they'll do it more because it's appreciated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that is slightly different. There's like a little nuance there where the actionability is like good and it's important, but like criticism is almost the wrong word for what I think we should be aiming towards, like kind of as a community, where reinforcing people positively is something that is like very rarely like pushed forward in like the discourse, right? Like it's all about like, what did people not like? What did people complain about? And yeah, that's like an issue,
Do we need shout out threads again?
Wouldn't hurt, I think.
Jake, you are in a Discord server. I don't think this is a
I'm in a
leak to
couple.
say.
Yeah.
Where the idea is to link players with
Yeah.
TOs.
Okay, that one.
Is this something we can talk about?
Yeah, no,
I don't know.
that one's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in it. So if someone said that it's being leaked, say
I
it's
don't know
for
why
me.
I'm in there.
If you make shit, you get in. No one, you're like, hey, I created this. I get to be here.
That's
No,
true. I thought making it was a mistake. I thought players would realize they had too much power. I'm kidding.
Well,
Go ahead.
we've got an interesting thing. There's a Discord where top players exist and have the ability to talk to top TOs, and I think example that I can use that involved myself was when Redemption Rumble was happening, and I was like, this is not counting for 2022, and
Because you
then
told
people,
players it wouldn't, and they kind of,
well, I said it wasn't counting for 2022. People were mad that it was not counting. Like Reddit was mad, and then players were mad that it was counting for 2023. Just like how Smash Camp does and whatever.
Because they were told it wouldn't be counting at all, and that was kind of the way.
I don't think that was what happened.
Come
I think that the actual it's not counting for 2022. I don't think that there was any. Sorry, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we're arguing the little thing here.
But there was definitely some. You're right. There was lost in translation was the fact that players believed this wasn't counting at all. When the intent was that it was not counting for that year and would count for the next year. So when this was something that I tweeted out, I know Moki and I know Cody had some issues with it. And after a little adding, a couple tags, but yeah, we talked about this in the server and I was very happy with how it ended up. I think Moki even like tweeted that he was sorry that it even like came off like he was criticizing the top 100. It was just one of the experiences that I don't really get a lot in Melee, which is just like heated on Twitter and then take to the Discord.
I think that Discord makes me like Moki a lot more because he's extremely reasonable in there. I think it's also good to kind of build that reflex for top players to just be like, hey, look, here are people that can fix this and will listen to you. Other than, and I mean, this is the issue because our top players are very popular, which is great. They have massive social media followings, which is, good, but eventually ends up being a form of very mild stochastic terrorism. when they phrase things a certain way towards a TO who has 800 followers and a day job and, like a home that they don't want people to blow up.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit like, you know, I think it's reasonable to complain and to, bring things to light. But, if you really do want things to change and just having a situation where people can listen to you, again, that's a reason that Twitter is a little bit rough for it, because like I've seen like, there was a situation with a player that happened recently where they tweeted and said some pretty like not chill stuff, right? And through back channels, you figure out there's some sort of psychotic break going on. It still doesn't make it okay, and they're still going to ride the bench for a bit. There's going to be a ban, but probably the best thing to do is to get family involved, get this, not necessarily off the internet to hide the bad things, but like someone is doing very badly right now. It is probably good to just like get them resources, and then a top player who said something that I think was very nice and positive brought a lot more attention to it in a way that like was very disjointed, and then resulted in some like people being very reasonably mad at that player who was saying those things, right? But I think it made things a lot worse, and I don't think that was really the intention. So I'm always a favor of any form of communication like that.
And what I think is good, the reason I bring up this Discord is because it was used this past weekend. It was used by, I don't know. I saw, well, I saw,
left.
Well, we don't need to blow up a spot, but yeah. I saw like 4 or 5 different top players use this specifically to talk about how they felt about Collision and how they felt about the schedule. I mean, I don't know.
Oh, it was super productive. There's a bunch of top players. RJ came in here and gave like a 7-paragraph answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, this is, we kind of had like a microcosm of this when Tafo tweeted this very thing that got us talking. Was we talked about it in the Melee Stats Discord, and we're able to articulate feelings better.
Oh wow.
I think that one of the things that we learned from this Discord is that there are ways to talk to people that are not telling your 50,000 followers that like everything is shit. It's very hard
because of this person.
Yeah, right. It's very, very hard to not start a witch hunt when you have only 280 characters. Did Elon up it to more? How many do we have?
I hope not. Elon's woke algorithm will never win. I want to add 2 things really quickly. One is that I think some top players actually caught heat from everyone for being the complainer when like other top players would tell them to be the one to complain. I think this is actually some of the story behind Leffen, honestly, sometimes.
Yeah.
The other
I remember
thing
Mango would always tweet that he was like, anything that was wrong, he'd at Leffen or whatever, and he'd be like, complain for us.
Exactly, and I think it's partly a meme, but also partly not. The second thing here, which is interesting, is I'm reading it from today, where like a top player who is a very popular top player said, I think it's a good idea to at the specific top players who like complain publicly without really listening, or directly message them and tell them to post here instead next time. I think they need to be called out so it stops being a repeating pattern behavior. It'll take time, but this Discord is clearly an improvement from before. 3 of them who were at the event came here throughout the weekend to talk about the schedule instead of shouting on Twitter, and I'd say it was a huge improvement. The top players who still don't come here and complain on Twitter, I think just need to be directly spoken to because there's a resource here that works. I think that's great.
Yeah. And the fact that it's the player who's saying that, it's a top player rather than like a TO, right? No, I think that the takeaway from this is that these are not inevitabilities. People will burn out because when you Melee's an all-you-can-eat buffet, right? No one's telling you to stop. There's no like bigger figure who runs stuff like a Riot or a Capcom who will stop you from running anything you want. It's gonna happen.
Well, I really have not been reading this Discord. They're like, can we get a formal off season?
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on here.
Oh
no.
We're like actually on a pretty good pace to end this episode without, like really going over. So watch what you say. I don't want to add anything extra in.
Okay.
But yeah, how I view this is that, I think Tafo has a lot of good points, but the inevitability of all of this doesn't really need to exist, right? We don't need to act as if burnout and stress and abuse need to be parts of running anything, right? And it's always going to happen, when you want to do something, people are going to be mad. So the people who make like AI videos making fun of you, it's always gonna happen. But you kind of gotta focus on the you have to focus on the the people who complain who you can actually have a conversation with. And I think that the top players are very, or they're actually doing that in Melee at least. And I would suggest if you are in another game and you want to do this, I think that it takes a little bit, and it takes some strong arming, and it takes some persistence to make sure people do it. But having conversations with these players, like it's mutually beneficial. People will understand that, like, being able to talk to a TO instead of being on Twitter and then having the TO have to be on their back foot the entire time, it leads to better understanding. And we will still live with the issues that the tweet brings up, right? People will still get burnt out. People will still age out. This is not even talking about the money aspect of it. Like, there's a lot here that we obviously did not directly mention. But I do think that in terms of complaints, there's a better method that we're working on, and I'm glad to see that the players are actually doing it, and I hope to see the scene, kind of hopefully change a little bit in that direction. I'm liking the change I'm seeing right now, and I hope to see it continue. Any last thoughts on this? Because we're getting close to the end. This is I think an episode that I've been really enjoying, but we're probably nearing the question section. So unless you guys have anything you want to say, we can get to the patron questions.
I will just, dump one last comment in.
Please do.
Which is that doing stuff for the community fucking rocks. I think that people need to know that that's why people do it. I think there's a lot of conversation, especially like around this sort of topic, or like when it comes to like people being appreciated or volunteering or whatever, that like people volunteering for the community is bad because they're not getting paid. And I think there are like two independent things here, right? Like the first is that like people who do work should get compensated for the work that they do. And like that's true. But that's like a greater problem with capitalism, right? Like that's not like a necessarily fundamental thing to the community. Like the thing is with our scene is that volunteering is very, very fun. And like doing things for the community like introduces you to all these super awesome people, and like it's very gratifying, and like you make a tangible difference in a community that you care about, and that rules. That's really cool. And I just want to like really hammer that to people that like maybe don't necessarily understand that. Like, oh, why would you ever be a TO? Why would you be a TO if like people are going to be mean to you? And it's like, okay, well, yeah, people are going to be mean to you, that fucking sucks, but like doing the thing is really cool. Like that's why people do it. People do it because it's awesome, and as long as it is awesome, people will do it.
I mean, in Tafo's tweet, there was someone who replied, and they said something about like, oh well, what's going to happen is people aren't even going to want a TO because everyone knows it sucks. I'm thinking like, no, it's because we're talking about it like this. It's like if you frame it as like this horrible thing that no one wants to do, then people will not want to go into it. But yeah, I mean, I cannot say have TO'd a lot. I wouldn't say that that's something, but the ones that I've done have been very rewarding, and the other aspects of the scene that I've given to have been very rewarding. And yeah, I think that you're right. When I saw Tafo's tweet, one of the things that really got me riled up was just how dour and how doomer it was, because there's so much joy that's involved in making something for the community, and it shouldn't just be seen as this thing that people have to do and will, get bullied out of the scene for. And it's one of those things, like, I mentioned this in the discussion, the Discord we had about it at the time, but I don't want people to view everything I'm doing with a shot clock above my head. Like what the stuff that I'm doing right now, I love doing. I love doing the top 100 or whatever else I do. I don't know, flying players out to stuff. Or do we still do that? Who knows? Maybe. keep your eye out.
Lord Powell, please lower the interest rates. We need this. We need this bad.
But I think that like we have talked about this so much in Melee Stats, where we will just be like, it was so awesome when this happened, right? If it's like our videos go out when feels so like a knot in my stomach, and then you like it's such a weird feeling because it's so gratifying as well. And then when we have players at stuff, like honestly, some of the most like above the moon I've ever been is when we reach out to a player for the first time, and they're just like so giddy. Like there's all these things when you give to the community that make you feel really good. And this stuff is cool. I think you're right. And if we talk about TOing like it sucks, well, yeah, people are gonna think it sucks. And obviously, maybe it's wrong to connect TOing to content creation or whatever. You know, there's very different things. But yeah, no, I agree.
Social behavior makes you happy.
Yep. Doing stuff rules. I mean, I saw somebody who was at the tournaments that I TO'd. Like, I think I TO'd their first tournament. I think I TO'd their first Arcadian. And they were here and they beat Bats and Foxy Grandpa and made top 32. And it's like,
it rocks.
That's dope.
Yeah.
It's just cool to see, right?
It's such a, I mean, we talk about the community up all the time, right? We talk it up. There's a reason why we're still here. And it'd be nice if the reasons why we leave were minimized. But yeah, you're right. If we focus on the reasons why we're here as much as we focus on the reasons why we want to leave, maybe it'd be a little different overall.
Yeah, it's like just run a pool. That shit rules.
Go do something. If you're listening to this and you think that's
make you feel better about your life, for sure. You can point to something and say, I did that.
Good.
It's rare these days.
Speaking of doing something, we've got some questions for you. So we've got a question about doing a very specific thing, and this is from.
Oh no.
This is from I think we call him Question Superstar. Zdreo. I know Seal's a content or a question superstar, but he got on our case about not giving enough time to create a good question. So apologize. Apologize to Seal.
We don't give him enough time.
Well, yeah, and then we say that they writ shitty questions. Hey, maybe we're the problem here.
No, okay. Let's dial it back.
Says Drio, question superstar, asks, which of the 5 gods would play the best on cocaine?
Oh, well, I want to clarify here.
This is so easy.
Are we under the assumption that they don't? Oh, sorry, Amby, go ahead.
I'm saying this is so easy. You better not mess this one up.
I know.
Very
like,
clear
are
answer.
we under the assumption that they're not on cocaine right now?
Assume that's not the case, or assume that's
one.
the case that they are not on cocaine.
Touchdown 1 instantly.
Yeah,
not even a question.
Yeah,
very good question, but not a question.
He's just not taking those drug tests we keep giving him.
he keeps giving us Kingu's piss.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's that comes back filled with stuff.
Smoked American weed. He saw all the presidents behind him like the Avatar while he played.
I think King Goose piss was purple.
Yeah, he was definitely appreciating freedom in America.
Well, he had some thoughts on America.
Still a good question, Zedria.
And India, for that matter. But,
yeah.
touched.
He was really not a fan of RRR, but for not the reasons you would expect or think.
Oh my god.
That is a great answer. Though I think touchdown 1 is it's definitely the answer that sounds the most correct. Even hey, I like the idea of Mewtwo King on cocaine. What would that look like?
All right, yeah.
Well, let's hit it to the next question.
Next question.
I got one here from Algebra 123230, which I'm sure will be a big hit. So, what about crypto-funded tournaments? Huh? Is that a yes? Is that a no? What's your perspective?
Oh, it really depends on what the ask is. If they understand that we think that they are idiots and suckers and we will take their money and spend it on drugs, yeah, all right. And, maybe they think they're smarter than me and they'll get some people into crypto. I don't know. I mean, This is a good question. That's a good question. I mean, I don't know. We're doing this. We had Fresh Cuts, which I had understood was an adult circumcision thing, but I think it's an NFT marketplace, isn't it? Right? And a bunch of people complained right afterwards and said, hey, these guys are stealing all my stuff. They're taking all my clips and just uploading them to their thing and doing this. Like, we're already there, I think, and I've answered this somewhat before. The reason I think it's okay is because we as a community are very, very skeptical of this sort of thing. And sure. I know Tafo and I disagree on this, right? I am not a crypto maximalist. I really am not. But, yeah, I mean, the prospect of it's your money, boss, is something that I think is okay, and I think we should draft Ultimate Smashers. I've been saying this a lot.
Why not?
Yeah.
They need something to do. They all quit the game at 17 anyway.
I mean, Steve's banned now. You might as well pilot some drones, buddy.
True.
Yeah.
We talked about this after top 8 at the bar, which was it's funny because sometimes the idea of your company not or your sponsor not existing in 6 months is a feature, not a bug.
It's actually a huge good thing because then I don't have to deal with all the damage that they're maybe doing.
Yeah.
You know.
Hey, maybe you take a lot of money from a VC and maybe they just right after they pay you.
Right. Or, the ideal is to right after they pay you and not like the Mango crypto blockchain extravaganza.
Well, yeah, that's trying to find the perfect medium, right? I think that's the issue with crypto is they're going to explode at some point. Do they pay you before
You
they
gotta
do?
lock down that net 30. That's all I got to say.
Yeah. Well, we've got a last question here. This is from Curly W. So Margot asks, as it is impossible to be both a commentator and a TO, which side will you be on in the inevitable death war?
It's commentator. I don't want it to be, but at this point, I've done more commentary than I've TO'd, especially recently. Yeah,
If it sweetens the deal, I think I'm also team commentary.
I think I'm
So
team
we can be
commentary
bros.
because I get to fight with Jorge. I could not shoot Jorge. I couldn't do it. I couldn't shoot Jack. I could shoot Mikey because he's robbed me many times. The vote was very unfair on 4-side fights, and I think that's no good. And I think it'd be fun to try and lace Walt with drugs. I've been trying to do that a bunch, and I don't know which side Dark Gen X lies on, or Touchdown Juan. So those are
I
two
wonder if there's a
powerful enemies.
player, if there's a player aspect to this, or if it's binary commentator or TO.
Commentary or TO, yeah. Because this
Players
is.
are like a mercenary group.
I think you should always root against the commentators because if you're only a commentator, unless you're like really like encapsulating the scene and telling stories and doing things that are really important, right? Or creating content that helps people. Like, what are we really doing, right? Like, we are, as John Boyce said, Keynesian fools doing make work while people compete or, actually build things in front of us. Though I will say, Stude's on our side, which Zedro pointed out, so we're winning.
Ooh, that's going to be tough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I will say, after recent news about BTS collapsing, you look at what the TOs say and you look at what the commentators say. I think I'm going TOs on that side. I saw a lot of. I really thought I would commentate this while people lost their jobs.
Every single person, and I love them, but I shoot them for this. Every single person who saw BTS fail and say the worst part about this is that I did not get to commentate Summit because I was next up, baby. I was next up. I was next up the whole time, kidnapping the executive producer's dog. You think you can beat that? You think you were going to Smash Summit 15? Not a chance. What was that?
I didn't hear anything.
Nah. All right. Where were we talking about? Baseball or something?
Well, I think we're talking about a similar subject. Baseball has grass, and we're talking about
Does it these days?
we're talking about our famously unnamed segment known to the fans as Touching Grass. Now, I was watching Top 8 with Seal, and Seal was like telling me, it was right when Junebug said multifaceted. He's like, he said it! So I guess it's the touching grass word. So, we are multifaceted human beings capable of having various interests. So touching grass is where we talk about something that's been going on in our lives that is not Melee related. And I will go first. I mentioned this to Chroma this past weekend, but it is Hater Central in the NBA. I'm a hater. I am an NBA fan.
Let's go.
There's Flame Wars. Dude, I was on NBA Reddit. I commented. I haven't commented on Reddit forever. I got in on it. It was so fun. There's a couple MVP candidates. One who's was presumed to be the runaway favorite, who is kind of getting destroyed on defense, and his team's been losing. And there's another who has been perennial runner-up, who has been doing a little better, and his team's been winning. And there's been a lot of posting from people who don't have any skin in the game just to make people mad. So I love that. But Maybe I use for touchy grass this time. I use a little more of a positive thing. So this past week, I went to Quizzo for the first time in forever. The bar trivia. I used to go all the time, like 2019, 2018, pre-pandemic stuff, and just kind of fell out of it, because of a global pandemic, and took a while to get back into it. But my friend hit me up, and he got a little group together. So we went to do bar trivia. We were in third place the entire time, which is not bad for a first time experience. I think I answered all the questions and not my friends. And then we overthought it. We bet 0 for the last one because we'd assumed that the last question was really hard, and we got it right and everyone else got it right. So we did not take home anything. Also, I will say, they were wrong. They said a lot of wrong things. They said the first submarine was invented in the late 1880s. That's not true.
Yeah, it was
they said that Ireland was the first country to legalize gay marriage. That's not true.
That sounds actually almost exactly wrong.
So I lost. Okay, you could say I lost, but come on. How am I supposed to win when they just fake answers? So that's my. Sorry, I said it was very positive, and then I just started to get very mad. Maybe I had more fun being a hater on NBA Reddit. Joel Embiid, 36 points and 18 rebounds, along with 4 blocks tonight. Also, one of the worst passes I've ever seen, but we take home the dub. What about you, Abby? What's been going on your end?
Yeah. So, having moved to this apartment with almost no furniture, there's no car. There's a very limited number of things I can be doing in my day to day. Yeah, we're talking in the pre-show about my ideal male living space,
This
which
rules.
is just
Look
a
at
completely empty ass room and an LTEC DDR pad, which I've been playing on fucking nonstop for like the past week. I don't have a bar, so I'm playing no bar.
Dude's rock.
Yeah, no. So I've been grinding the Life 4 DDR like ranking requirements, which don't make any sense if you use ITG Mania because you have the ITG Life Bar and not the DDR Life Bar, which is way harder and there's different timing windows. But yeah, I've been enjoying playing no bar because I don't normally play that way, and it's a lot more stressful on the human body. It feels a lot more like doing a weird agility ladder exercise rather than gripping the bar and wiggling around like a madman. So I've been enjoying that. I feel really motivated to improve at DDR relative to other games recently because my workplace actually has a DDR cabinet, and I'm determined to destroy every score on that cabinet. Yeah, so that's what I've been doing. I've been working on getting better at DDR.
Nice. Love to hear it. What about you, Chroma?
Yeah, I mean, I had the actualization of a dream. I hit 225 on bench. That was pretty big for me. And then I got kind of tired, so I'm taking a bit of a deload week. Fixing up my house, which is always an interesting exploration into what people think constitute fixes and how many different weird electrical boxes I can find in my walls or, under my carpets. So really learning a lot, and just, my God, is the state of housing in America just fucked. And then outside of that, I guess, which is interesting, is that there's a bit of a banking crisis, which is, occupying quite a bit of my time lately, but is very interesting to say the least. And I see a lot of Smashers having thoughts on them, some of them very interesting, and some of them, just, I guess, missing some of the context. But it's cool watching people, I guess, grapple with that. And, yeah. Outside of that, I had a cat play date with Jack Silla's cat Puzzle, who is 17. And my cat, who is 9.
Wow, how did that go?
There was on screens. They both really weren't looking at each other. But Puzzle looks like a very nice little lady.
Very cute, very cute.
And of course, Four Side Fights is tomorrow. We were writing questions for it.
Hey.
Plug.
Well, we were about to get to it, but if you want to force your way into it,
yeah,
we'll get to the plugs. Jake, thank you so much. You've been such a great guest. If people want to follow you, where can they do so?
All right, so I am on Twitter these days. It's Chrome09, and just kind of guess how you spell that. I guess it's under my name, but I just go wild with it. I've got
Hey, there's audio listeners.
I've got like 200 followers or something like that now. It was actually kind of neat doing top 8 and seeing like everyone else I was with had like a K next to their name, and I'm just chilling here. Four-side fights is tomorrow. We are on the Melee on Me thing. We have Salt, Wills, Flambeau. It was supposed to be the Bemi episode. And then we also have Afghans, who I
Yeah.
didn't really know very much about, and I'm learning more about this week. And I've got some questions planned.
So, just to be clear,
Yeah.
you're plugging the Melee It On Me thing. Is Melee It On Me Twitch?
It Melee'd on me Twitch. Yeah, you know, like the thing you
Twitch.tv/Melee It On Me.
thing you stream on, you know, that's not a big deal. You're gonna find it, and it's gonna be on
Okay.
YouTube later. You know, I appreciate when people watch the VODs, but you know, give the YouTube videos some love. They're put together very well by JD.
And Four-Side Fights, if people want to find that on Twitter, where can they do so?
I think it is indeed just go to my Twitter. You know, I'm gonna.
It's
retweet
Four-Side
everything.
Fights.
It is indeed Four-Side
I would
Fights.
like you to say it, but it is just Four-Side Fights.
Four-Side Fights. But you know, let's get real. You know, there's a lot of propaganda about Mikey supposedly winning some episodes, and I think if you do a good job counting only the legal votes and the legal points, then you'll come to a different answer.
Well, I've got a kindred, Mikey's a kindred spirit, because back when we used to do game shows on this show, I think we could still do the Edward Buddy Stock Exchange. I think that's still a thing.
Yeah.
I definitely won more than I think made sense. So I'm with Mikey on this one.
That's fair. I think that's fine.
And, speaking of the Edwin Buddy Stock Exchange, if you want to watch any of our old episodes that feature it, you can do so on the Melee Stats Archive on YouTube. Over on our main channel, Melee Stats, that's where you're going to find our longer form videos. If you want to watch these episodes live, twitch.tv/Melee Stats. Twitter, we're Melee Stats Pod. That's where you're going to find all of our results posting and links to our other stuff. MeleeStats.co, we put out articles about Monday Morning Marth, about what happened that past week, and then When's Melee, about what Melee is happening this coming weekend. And if you love everything we do and you just want to support us in the best way, patreon.com/MeleeStats. And I will say, if you want to follow what we do, you might see a little bit of a return of what we did before as a very small leak that you'll see soon. It's
Well,
March.
we're gonna rank 1,000 people, aren't we?
No, it's
10,000 patrons.
We're not. Well, maybe at some point. We're not ranking 1,000 people, but just keep in mind it is March and it's a very mad month. So maybe there will be something about that in the near future if you want to check out our Twitter. But other than that, you can catch us next time we do it, because I don't know, it'll be a fun episode. I never said because before as to why you should watch, and now I'm realizing there might not be a good reason. But I appreciate you for watching this episode, and Jake, I appreciate you for being on. Ambi, I appreciate you for being on, and stick around because we'll be doing another episode. So catch us again next time. Peace.